All right, welcome in, Gun Talk Hunters. I'm your host, KJ, and today we've got a great one. We're going to talk fall turkey hunting. I know it's a whitetail wood season, but it's also fall turkey season, and Mr. Chris Ellis from Timney Trigger is knee-deep in it.
Hey, I'm KJ, dedicated lifelong hunter here. If you got an interest in all things hunting, you're in the right spot. Whether chasing quail across the plains of Oklahoma or in pursuit of elk in the backcountry of British Columbia, you'll always find me on the hunt.
This episode is brought to you by Ruger, Range Ready Studios, Silencer Central, Savage Arms, Franke, RCBS, Smith & Wesson, and Hodgdon. All right, Chris Ellis from Timney Triggers, welcome in, sir.
Hey, appreciate you having me on, man. Thank you so much for y'all's time.
Well, you know, when you called today and we were kind of talking about what we were wanting to talk about, you know, typically most podcasts this time of the year are pretty deep into the whitetail conversation. And I've been there myself. And there's nothing wrong with that. But man, you are about the most diehard turkey hunter, and really it starts ramping up for you in the fall.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm a whitetail guy. I grew up in West Virginia, and I whitetail hunt. I've been whitetail hunting for over 40 years, and it is time. There's no doubt about it. Rut's coming on, cool fronts coming through, deer are on their feet during daylight hours. It is time. But having said that, if there's a turkey season open, spring, fall, winter, I got to go. I'm sorry. It's who I am. It's what defines me.
Man, you know, it's one of those times of year where I don't often think about it, but like Oklahoma has a fall turkey season.
Yep.
Now, man, it's just different tactics. Typically when I'm shooting a turkey, it's like, it's not expected. Like it's a kind of an afterthought for me because I'm so focused on whitetail. Like I forget that there's plenty of turkeys out there, and I see turkeys every time I'm in the whitetail woods.
Yeah, which is, you know, it's not uncommon. I talked to a lot of hunters throughout the year, being, you know, an avid hunter myself and working for a trigger company that stands behind hunting 110%.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people say, you know, I'll be in my deer stand or in my box blind or sitting on the ground or whatever and have an opportunity. And yeah, that is a form of fall turkey hunting. Now, for me in the fall, if you put me in a box blind, you'd have to super glue my feet to the floor because I am not going to sit there. I promise you. I do not deer hunt for turkeys. Nothing wrong with that. It's just I have a different sport that I like to play in the fall, just like I like to play in the spring. And I like to get up close and personal, and I like to communicate with them. And I like to be honest with you in the fall, just to torque them off. You know?
Yeah. So what are they doing in the fall? I know they're really in a big clutch. I mean, every time I see them, it seems like they're in 40s and 50s, and man, I've seen them as much as 100 in a group. How are you picking one apart from that group?
Yeah,
how are you going to chase them?
You know, in early fall, you know, they're kind of broken down. You'll have some gins and jennies and hens together. You'll have some hens that didn't have any offspring that year together. You'll have a wad of jakes running around together.
Yeah.
You know, then you have some young of the year gobblers, and then you've got your mature gobblers running around. And, you know, a turkey, especially if you talk about male turkeys, they're always in competition for breeding year round. You know, who's on first, what's on second, you know. So if you can find a fall flock of young gobblers, knowing that they're in competition for breeding for next spring, and you can challenge them, or you can be like, there's a new kid in town. It can be pretty. It's a heck of a lot of fun if you like communicating with turkeys and turkey vocalizations. I'll hear more if it's a good fall, a lucky fall, especially when there's a lot of acorns. And they're really concentrating on, you got to remember, from where I'm at, West Virginia, there isn't any agriculture. So I don't get to drive by a bean field or a cornfield, especially when you live in the mountains like I do. But what you'll find out is if you hit an early morning right after the roost, or you get a challenge situations, you'll hear more turkey vocalizations in the fall than most people hear in the spring. Like, for example, I hunted a couple different states this year in the fall. One of them I was hunting was in Ohio. And I got right underneath their roost tree, put them to roost that night. I heard them fly up, and it was a Motley Crue concert. That, you know, the first hour after daylight, you know, and I just concentrate on one or two turkeys, and I communicate with them the way they're communicating back. Um, if you like to call, you can't call loud enough or too much in the fall.
Really?
So you get a lot of tree talk and then they fly down. And at that time, I like to concentrate on shooting gobblers. We'd all like to kill mature gobblers, but they're a little
Right.
tougher in the fall in my experience. But your last year's jakes that are now getting ready to be two, and then you've got the young of the year young gobblers. You start kikiing to them and gobbler clucking to them and gobbler yelping to them and
Yeah.
kind of challenge them a little bit. It's pretty lively.
Are you mostly, I mean, I guess it's all dependent upon like your situation, but are you mostly sticking with a slate call? Or are you doing a diaphragm or a box call? Like, what do you really kind of, what calls do you kind of hone in on?
Well, kikiing is kind of a kiki run in the fall is kind of like the old Appalachian go-to, a lost hen call, or gobbler yelps. And I
Yeah.
find in my arsenal, I have a couple dedicated fall turkey calls. They're all friction.
Yeah.
Mouth calls to me are fantastic, but that high-pitched squeal of that kiki, it's hard for me to get that right, and it's hard for me to get that mouth call to stay tuned because I blow it
Yeah.
a lot and I blow it very, very loud. And it's probably just a personal thing, but I've got a slate call that works phenomenal, for kikis and gobbler yelps. And then I got a couple I'm an old Appalachian soul, so I've got a couple old
Yep.
scratch boxes that I can really sing in the fall.
Yeah.
So you've got a couple options in the fall. You can either one challenge them right off the roost or on the way back to the roost, in areas where you're allowed to hunt, daylight to dark,
Right.
sunrise or sunset. You can also in Appalachia, you can use dogs during
Oh,
the
okay.
day when the turkeys are kind of loafing or doing their thing, that you can scatter them. And their instinct is to flock back, like you talked about. You see a lot of large fall flocks, especially
Huh.
when you get late fall into the winter. They get a lot of those big giant flocks together.
Yeah. How
Or
do
you
you,
can, you can deer hunt them. You can sit in
yeah.
a green field or a green patch or overtake food source and just hope that you happen to see one.
Yeah.
I prefer to do either bust them up with a dog or bust them up using my feet and the terrain.
Yeah.
Uh, or I really like that first after the morning fly down when they're all kind of communicating. How was your night? Where are you at now? Let's get together here for a
Yeah.
little bit. But it takes about an hour, maybe a little bit less before they walk off and start feeding. But that's when you hear the most vocalizations is when they're just calling each other back and
Yeah.
making sure everybody's, that recall after you flush
Yep.
them, or that assembly call
Mm-hmm.
when they first fly down and they want to get together and walk off. But it's it's where we used to hunt turkeys.
Right.
Now everybody's concentrating on the spring. And don't get me wrong, I hunt every day of spring season back home.
Right. But how do you train that pup to break them up? I mean, are you just sending the dog after them and then
It's
call them back?
Yeah, there's been volumes written about it. I happen to have a Feist dog that I walk with every day for exercise and for training and for myself as well, to
Yeah.
get out every morning, the first hour or so of daylight. And I just got fortunate that this dog flushed a lot of turkeys, and on the farm and continued to flush turkeys, and he barks. I mean, because if you have a dog that flushes and don't bark, you really don't know what you have.
Right.
And this dog just then you've got a hunting dog that knows what he's hunting for. So then you start doing the tail fans and the wings and whatever. You get
Yeah.
a young puppy excited.
Hmm.
But this little flesh dog I got is he likes to run in there and chase them around and flush them like crazy. And then the game is you go to the flush spot.
Right.
Sometimes you put your dog in. Old timers will put them in a bag or put them underneath your legs and sit still and call them back. I generally, if the truck's close enough with this young puppy I have, I generally try to get him in the dog box and then hustle back,
Yeah.
build a little makeshift blind. Sometimes I carry blind material with me. Sometimes I don't. Lots of times I just sit against a big tree and find some brush and stuff and stick it down in front of me. And you won't take you long. You'll hear a call. You'll hear either a lost hen call or assembly call or something. And
So
you just start mimicking what you hear. And
Yeah.
they just get right back together, and hopefully they get back together within shotgun range, and it's a heck of a lot of fun. If you get a bunch of gobblers going back and forth, coming in, it can be a lot of gobbling right off the roost, a
Right.
lot of gobbler yelps. It's very common in the fall, and to be honest with you, you just hear just about every vocalization a wild turkey can make. So
Yeah. It's one of those things you kind of never think about, but man, those diehard hunters, turkey hunters especially, they will not, like, that's their one goal. Like, deer really don't matter. Like, kind of how I am with duck hunting. Man, the duck hunting can wait until I'm out of the deer woods.
That's what I do. If I had my druthers, I would fall turkey hunt as many states as I could. We're blessed to have some of those old states still available, and some of them you can use
Yeah.
dogs, some of them you can't. But the drill's the same. You locate the food source, you locate the roosting source, and then
Yeah.
you figure out how to get in between. And it's mostly woodwise, which I really like growing up in Appalachian Mountains, is using the terrain, especially if you're walking the high ridges, calling down into the hollers or into the valleys, for flushing them and for scattering them is just it's just who doesn't like to take a walk on a nice crisp fall day when the beautiful colors are out and it's bluebird skies, low expectation, walk a few ridges, make a few calls,
See,
and then when you strike them, get ready because it's going to be loud.
That'd be my
long.
problem, Chris. That would be my problem because I would be like, all right, I'm gonna try my hand at turkey hunting in the fall on one of those beautiful fall crisp mornings, and that's the morning where I'd see just a absolute giant buck. That would.
You're not wrong because I've had this kind of theory and I have no way to prove it, but I've seen it myself. When you're walking in the crunchy leaves, the hardwood leaves, and it sounds like you're walking on potato chips, you think there's no way I'm going to walk up on any game, right? But if you're using a turkey call while walking, you'd be surprised how many critters you walk up on because when a hillside full of turkeys and they're scratching for acorns, it's loud. There's no doubt about it. Doesn't sound like a deer, doesn't sound like a squirrel, doesn't sound like a human. It just sounds like someone's got a leaf blower out there blowing all the leaves out.
Yeah.
And if you're calling during that, I'll give you a good example. I live in bear country in West Virginia. I happen to live in the county where there's tons of bears. Well, I was fall turkey hunting the other day and I was walking that blind. I had no idea. Just walking down a ridge, calling into the valleys and using the top of the ridge and kind of tucking underneath the top. So I was out, wasn't being skylighted. And I walked up and I looked and I was like, is that a bear? And this was in bow range. And I was like, is that a bear sitting there looking at me? Because I don't care how many bears you see. When you're walking through the Appalachian hardwoods and you see a Volkswagen, you're like, that's a huge animal. I literally walked up on 3 bears turkey hunting this year. 2 of them were within bow shot, and one of them was in a pretty chip shot if you were rifle hunting for bears. So
no kidding.
I think I wasn't playing the wind. I wasn't watching which way the wind was blowing or my scent or anything. I wasn't quiet. I was crunch, 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 crunch. And I think that turkey call just gives them a little bit of ease thinking, well, here comes a whole bunch of turkeys.
Yeah. Maybe I'll have a snack. Maybe you were the snack.
Maybe I was a snack. Well, they were gorgeous. We had a heck of a white oak and red oak mast in some areas of West Virginia. And on my farm, I was blessed with them. So they were just gorging on acorns and rooting around. And I just interrupted their snack time. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's pretty good. Hey, Chris, we're gonna take a break here. We're gonna read a few messages from our sponsors, but when we jump back in, we had some experiences with Timney Trigger's new lever action trigger, and I want to talk a little bit more about that when we come back.
Unmatched precision with the Ruger American Gen 2. In the heart of the wilderness, precision matters. Ruger introduces the American Gen 2 rifle. Designed for hunters who demand excellence, the Ruger American Gen 2 offers enhanced accuracy, smooth bolt action, and durable design. It's the perfect companion for any hunting expedition, providing reliable performance every time you pull the trigger. Trust the Ruger American Gen 2 to deliver when it counts. Visit Ruger.com to learn more and find your next hunting rifle. It's time to prepare for the shot of a lifetime. Whether you're a seasoned hunter or new to the sport, preparation is key. I preach it all the time. At Range Ready Studios, we offer the training you need to make that shot of a lifetime. Chris Serino is on staff, and he has a host of instructors on hand to provide personalized trainings in state-of-the-art facilities and practical exercises that build your confidence and skills. From precision marksmanship to quick target acquisition, we've got you covered.
Don't leave your success to chance. Visit rangereadystudios.com to learn more. In the backcountry, every ounce counts. When the hunt takes you to the extremes, the Savage Ultralight Elite is built to go the distance. Featuring a carbon fiber wrapped barrel and an MDT HNT 26 stock for perfect balance. The Ultralight Elite is engineered for hunters who demand performance at the highest elevations. Precision, power, all in a rifle weighing under 6 pounds. The Savage Ultralight Elite, designed for the backcountry, built for the hunt. When precision meets innovation, you get the Franke Momentum, a rifle built for those who demand more from their hunt. Designed for ultimate comfort with its ergonomic stock, precision barrel, and crisp trigger pull, the Franke Momentum gives you the confidence to take that perfect shot. Hunt with momentum, the Franke Momentum, a new force and precision. Find yours at frankeusa.com.
CZUSA.com is where you're going to find the CZ600 series rifles. They've got an American version, Alpha version, the Lux, the Range, and the Trail. Now, let's look a little bit more into the Trail, because the Trail is like that lightweight that just, it just screams backcountry rifle. But it is a new standard in the CZ600. It's got features like AR magazine compatibility and 223 Remington, and uses CZ Bren 2 magazines in 7.62 by 39. In addition to a common magazine trend, the Trail delivers ambidextrous mag release and safety levers that will feel familiar to those who use the AR platform. And we all know that is one of the key guns out there that everybody uses and everybody knows. So why not match what you're using in the field to what you're already familiar with? Check out the CZ600 series Trail at CZUSA.com. All right, you know what I love about traveling on the road is being able to take all my firearms with me. And if you're going to do that and you're going to go state to state to start hunting, you need something to keep them secure. I've got a topper on my truck, so, I can leave that open, but there's just a pane of glass covering that. So what I like to do is a Snap Safe Trunk Safe 2. This is a large storage capacity for tools, firearms, equipment, documents, and much, much more that you can lock away easy. You can tie it down, you can lock it in place, and it won't leave your vehicle. So if you're looking for a way to keep your firearms safe on the road, check out snapsafe.com.
In 1854, Smith & Wesson launched a lever gun. That was the volcanic lever action. All right. Very nice gun. I'm sure it was acclaimed back in the day. But times have changed. I'm telling you right now, times have changed, and Smith & Wesson jumped back into the lever gun market with their Model 1854. Now you can get it in a traditional walnut stock, or if you're a more tactical age and you don't want to look like your granddad out there hunting, you can go with a little more tactical version. It's got M-LOK. But let's talk about some of the finer details of the Model 1854. I like to start with the trigger, man, because behind every great gun is a great trigger. And the 1854 absolutely just knocked it out of the park with their flat-face trigger. I really like that. And then on the safety aspect of things, you look at the magazine tube. It's removable. So there's no like dumping the gun out and everything like that. You can actually remove the magazine tube, and it just makes sense. It just makes sense to me that that's the way it probably should have been designed in the first place. But it's got a threaded barrel. It accepts mounts compatible with Marlin 1894 hole patterns. Again, a walnut stock or a black synthetic stock with textured grip panels, where you need it most, which is, I love that. Excess sights ghost ring rear sight, which is top notch. But anyway, man, if you really want to stand out, either in the field or at the range, check out the 1854 series from Smith & Wesson, smith-wesson.com. Let's talk about powder. Hodgdon.com. That's where you find a lot of your powder needs. Let's talk more about Winchester Sta-Ball Match. This temperature-insensitive double base ball powder is stable in extreme hot or cold conditions. So to me, what that means is if I'm reloading in the hot temperatures of Louisiana, man, when I take off to Oklahoma and the temperatures absolutely tank, I can count on that ammunition. I can count on that powder to be stable. And, you know, typical of a ball powder, precise metering contributes to consistent velocity and pressure with lower standard deviations, ingredients that are paramount to match grade accuracy. Now, you're looking at, like, with Stay Ball Match, what you're looking at is 223 Remington, 224 Valkyrie, 22-250, 308 Winchester, and 30-06. And a couple more that if you want to test it out. So find out more about Winchester Stay Ball Match at hodgdon.com/Winchester. All right, we're back with Chris Ellis of Timney Triggers and Fall Turkey. We're going to switch gears. We're going to switch them from first to second and go from hunting in the hardwoods in the fall with turkeys to slinging lead downrange and in the woods with a Timney lever action trigger. Man, I'll tell you what. So this is, you didn't ask me to do this, but I was on the website and there's a review. There is one review and it's from Marion H. This is a verified buyer and he says, what he says. He gives it a 5-star review. The factory trigger on my new Marlin 1895 weighed in at 7 pounds, 10 ounces. After install of the Timney and operating the trigger a bunch, it weighed in at 3 pounds, 7 ounces. He says, amazing difference. And he goes on.
Yeah.
And he says, at the end, he says, you know, I have 3 more Marlins that will be getting this upgrade sooner rather than later. So all that being said, this trigger is a major upgrade for your lever guns.
Absolutely. Our customers, you know, we've been around almost nearly 80 years just by listening to our customers are they're the ones that tell us what triggers to build next, right? So we always are querying them and asking them, what triggers would you like for us to build next? And most of the popular triggers that we have right now came from our customers. I mean, they know what platforms they're working on. Isn't that crazy? We now call rifles and pistols and shotguns platforms, but anyhow.
I know.
So we had many requests for the Marlin, and the Marlin rifle was very dear to me. It's a fantastic rifle. It was my first centerfire rifle when I was young, growing up in West Virginia. It's what I took the most deer with in high school, into college. Yeah. It was we call it the meat getter. It was my deer hunting rifle. You got to remember, in West Virginia, you're hunting hardwoods, at least where I grew up. And you're shooting deer at 50 yards, right? I mean, it's just, and you're walking a lot. You know, this was before we had a lot of people hunting out of ladder stands and box blinds and ground. No, you just went out and you found game trails. You found scrapes and rubs. You found a lot of deer sign, and you sat somewhere where you were out of the wind and concealed against an old oak tree. And when a deer walked by, there it was. So I fell in love with, you know, everything to me is, when you get a little bit older, it's kind of retro, right? You kind of like to think about, you know, I was in a good mood and happy in high school shooting deer.
It's college. Nostalgia.
I didn't have much stress, right? Talking about deer hunting, man, I was mad at him, as the kids say. I was after the deer as hard as I could, still am. But that Marlin gun I fell in love with. It was a 3.36 and 30-30, phenomenal deer round. And then as I got a little bit older, here came a 45-70, and then a couple bears happened to be, you know, taken with a 45-70. And then I got a chance to go to South Africa with my brother. And what did I take? I took a Marlin 45-70 and shot Plains game, and I hunted in Alaska with a 45-70. And it's just always been, maybe I want to be a cowboy. Maybe I want simpler times. I'm chasing that high school buzz of being turned loose in the woods of deer hunting. I don't know, but it was romantic to me and still is romantic to me. So when we started getting these customer requests, I couldn't get the engineering fast enough.
Well, I'm telling you. So we developed them we started messing with the Timney lever action trigger on our show Build Box. And so we've got this guy's, I mean, it was an old Sears and Roebuck model. And it didn't go into the Sears and Roebuck, but for the giveaway, so we're giving this gun away. It's a brand new Marlin, 1895. I mean, it's brand new. And we installed this trigger. I installed this trigger. Chris Sereno kind of gave me a little bit of help with it, but it was very easy. And I think that's the more important thing, because really when you think about, like, there's a lot of parts there on a
Yes, there
lever
are.
gun that we're not used to operating on. We're not used to be
Exactly.
taking these guns down like an AR or a
Right.
bolt action.
Yeah.
So there was a little bit of fitment that I was like, okay, hold on a second. You got to take this screw out first and then this anyway.
Yeah.
But man, super easy, which is what Timney's always been about. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't, you don't have to be a gunsmith to install this, and it is really easy.
Yeah, you're right. There is a learning curve if you've never taken the buttstock off of a Marlin lever gun. Right. And the parts are a little different. We kind of know the parts fairly well of a bolt action rifle. We
Right.
kind of know the parts very well when it comes to like an AR or a 1022.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the Marlin is not a hard trigger to install, but there is a little bit of a learning curve because most people that I talk to have not taken it apart. But once you do it once, it's not that difficult. I've done it multiple times. And it's like anything else. You know, the first time you put something together, you're like, ooh, I had to read the instructions 2 or 3 times. I had to get on
Yeah.
Timney and go to their YouTube channel on the installation.
That's it.
I may
That's
have to call
100% what I do.
a tech at Timney and say, I've got this thing in front of me and
Yeah.
it doesn't seem like I need any special tools, but it's this screw and it's this one. But when Alan Timney started Timney back in 1946, it's the same philosophy we have to these days.
Yeah.
It has to improve the accuracy, your accuracy with that firearm. It has to be easily installed with common, kitchen counter type tools. And then it needs to be adjustable where it needs to be adjustable for the user, or it needs to come, in the case of the Marlin, an appropriate pull weight for that
Right.
situation. Marlins, in my mind, and our mind here at Timney, majority of them are used for collection or for shooting back in the backyard or plinking, but the highest majority of them are used for hunters.
Right.
So a good trigger at 3 pounds, but more importantly, the poundage is right. But one of the things that Timney has made Timney is, a 3 pound trigger in a hunting rifle is fantastic. But if it's not repeatable, if it's not a crisp trigger, if it doesn't break the exact same way every single time for the lifetime of that trigger, then it's not a Timney. It's just not, because the hillbilly logic of how to shoot better is if you want to hit the same hole twice, the trigger has to break the same way twice, or you really got something else going on. Maybe it's a barrel or something's loose somewhere. But to start by improving accuracy with any firearm, taking a look at a trigger that consistently breaks the exact same way, even if it's heavier. I'd rather have a heavier trigger that broke the same way, because my muscle memory learns that when my brain says I'm on target and I can make that shot, a good trigger will take out a lot of the physical barriers to that. Like we talk about creepy triggers or draggy triggers, or triggers that don't necessarily break the same way. Then you add an element in there to when your brain calls, I can make that shot finger, time to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
If there's something mechanical in there that's not allowing you to hit the same place twice, you may want to take a look at your trigger. So when our engineers designed the Marlin trigger, the drop-in Marlin trigger, we had to, same mantra that Alan Timney used. Does it improve the accuracy of that rifle? Does it improve your experience for the application? And, there's a lot of different Marlins out there. We found out that, we have to deal with tolerances way back when, and we figured out roughly, we're learning to these days, thanks to our customer, we're right about 1983, 1980-ish something. Mm-hmm. The tolerances there are perfect for our trigger,
Yeah.
And I don't know if some of the old historical Marlins need to be monkeyed with or not. That's kind of a personal preference. But I do know that people are enjoying modern Marlin rifles and with the Timney, and they understand what Timney can help you do for accuracy there. And it's just a phenomenal deer. It's a great pointing rifle. It's fun to shoot. It's easy to shoot. And they're accurate. I mean, they are very, very accurate. So
very much so. And I think you hit on, the major thing is just the repeatability.
That's it.
And I mean, yeah, it's good. It feels like a Timney. It feels crisp. It's smooth, but it's 100% repeatable. And
Yeah.
if you're wanting to be accurate, especially, lever guns, because a lot of these guys nowadays, I mean, they're going with scoped rifles. They want to accurize them. I mean, that's one of the bigger points of, putting in a different trigger. You're wanting to get better. You're wanting to get better repeatability.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of overlooked, by a
Yeah,
lot of folks. They
it
just
is.
think,
I was talking triggers 20 some years ago, and back then, believe it or not, triggers were important, the same as they are today, but there wasn't a
yeah,
lot of people talking about it. There wasn't a lot of people talking about trigger terms like pull weight, over travel,
yeah,
sear engagement. They weren't talking about trigger terms. They were just talking about, every gun comes with one, Ellis, and you got to take the gun apart. I understand. I understand.
yes,
I've dealt with that for 20 some years. But one of the things I did screw up on, KJ, and I'm being honest with you, was I talked too much about pull weight back then.
oh, really?
Yeah, I did. And if you look at, let me give you an example. If you
Hmm.
come up to me and you said, "Hey man, I got a car that'll go 100 miles an hour," I was like, "Great, that's awesome. Is it comfortable to 100 miles an hour?" "Oh no, it's just an old beater, and you don't want to go 100 miles in it, but it'll go 100 miles an hour." Or if you come up to me and say, "Yeah, I can go 100 miles an hour in my car," and I'm like, "Geez, what kind of car you got?" "Oh, I got a Lamborghini," and you don't even know you're going 100 miles an hour, right?
Yeah.
So
Uh-huh.
that's kind of the way I look at pull weight. There are triggers out there with lighter pull weights or correct pull weights that may not necessarily be repeatable or be crisp
Yeah.
or have the over travel set correctly. So yes, pull weight is important. If you have a 7-pound hunting rifle and it takes 10 pounds to break the trigger, automatically you have to move the rifle, right? I mean, it's just physics. But
Yeah.
that's not the end all. If I could hang my hat on something now, 20 years later, about talking about triggers,
Yeah.
I don't care necessarily as long as the pull weight is appropriate, but I
Mhm.
care, is it repeatable? Is it something I can get muscle memory around and learn how to shoot this thing with a very, very low learning curve?
Yeah.
You can learn anything with repeatability. I mean, even
You
with,
really can.
yeah, but it takes a long time. But if you
So,
have something like, I'm kind of a trigger snob and I like all my rifles to break in the 3-pound range because I'm a hunter.
mhm.
So if it's a 3-pound range and it's got a tight wall and a really crisp break and a pretty decent reset, I could become very accurate with that. So
Yeah. And I mean, repeatability and just being more accurate. That's what we want. And you only get that out of being repeatable. Doing the same thing twice over and over will
yep.
yield your
Well, that's
results.
what we expect out of modern ammunition now. We're blessed to have great ammunition that you don't have that much deviance from round to round, right? You used
Yep.
to have to, when I was growing up, go to the barber shop and talk about people going elk hunting or going out west or whatever. They talked about magic hand loads and each little grain of powder, and you had to have this
Yes.
much in there, and you had to have this bullet, and you had to get that. But we're so blessed nowadays with modern firearms and modern ammunition that you're getting that stuff right out of right out of the factory boxes
Right.
lots of time,
Yeah.
and plus or minus for deer hunting. So especially if you're going to talk about stretching your barrel out a little bit, that a lot of people are doing now with competition shooting and with hunting, and a 300-yard shot is the old 50-yard shot for me. So
Yeah.
if you're going to shoot 300 yards or plus, everything in the beginning needs to be a tight barrel, action, trigger, good optics on there the correct way, good foundation to be able to do that.
Right.
And the trigger is a huge part of that. There's no doubt.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I do have a funny story for you. So I'm sitting there every night. My kids go out to the garage. They pull out their hunting rifle and they dry fire. So this is a process they do every night.
Yeah.
So my youngest son, 10, he goes out there and I'm like, hey, I want you to try this one because I think the length of pull for you is going to be a little bit better. And he gets behind the gun and it's a 2-stage and he sits there and he does it and he goes and he does it again and he looks at me and he goes, can I have the other one back? Immediately. You know what he's requesting? He's requesting my Remington 700 Calvin Elite trigger.
Yep.
That's what he wants back because he's like, he goes, it's just more comfortable. Like,
congratulations, you may have a trigger snob.
I do have a trigger snob, and that's what I blame Timney for that.
Yeah, well, my daughter came home last year for around the holiday time. She's been in school forever, and she
Mhm.
was like, "Dad, I think I want to go deer hunting." And I was like, "Great, you can go with me in the morning, and we'll put up a blind, or you can get in a double buddy stand with me or something." She goes, "No, no, Dad, I think I'd like to go deer hunting." And I was like, "Really? Great, 26 years old, awesome." Perfect. So I did the same thing. We got out 1022 with a nice trigger in it from Timney, and
Yep.
we practiced, and then she got the anatomy of a whitetail deer for shot placement, and she studied, and then
Yeah.
we got I had a little mini Mauser built one time, and it got a great Timney in it that Calvin built for me, and we practiced dry firing, and we did some deer targets, dry firing, and she went out and shot that morning, and that evening a little doe ball came in, and it was antler season, and she put a great shot on it, and 30 yards later she was bringing home the bacon.
Yeah.
She couldn't wait to turn a game animal into meat and a meat into the meal to share with everybody, all her friends and
That's
stuff,
cool.
just to say, hey, I can do this too. And I brought home dinner.
Yeah.
So, but you're right, dry firing is a fantastic practice,
Oh,
and
yeah.
because there's no boom and there's no recoil, you can feel the click, you can feel the break of that trigger,
Yeah.
and you can trust yourself. My eyes on target, my point of aim is correct. I am ready to hit that target.
Yeah.
And when they squeeze that trigger and that point of impact moves, whether the scope moves a little bit, whatever, they know, hey, I don't think this trigger's the one I need. I don't think this
Yep.
trigger's the one
And
I
that's
want.
that's exactly what he was like. He was like, yeah, I want that other one back. And it's a Calvin Elite Remington 700 because he's dry fired it so much. I mean, they're doing, 25 to 30 dry fires a night, starting in like early September. Probably maybe the last week of August is when they start dry firing every night. And because I want them to know the trigger, like I wanted them to have an intimate relationship with that trigger where they know exactly what they're feeling, because man, when that heart rate gets up, that's the last thing you want to think about.
Right. Yeah, you're exact. The last thing you need is some physical barrier when you work that hard to sit still, watch the wind,
Yeah.
be quiet, and get immersed into Mother Nature and immersed into that hunting.
Yeah.
You become a hunter. You are sitting
Yep.
there. I am actively hunting. I am hunting for this game animal, and that shot presents itself.
Yeah.
You owe it to yourself and you as a hunter and to everybody else to be sure that you know exactly when that trigger is going to break, and you know exactly what your point of aim is, and like the anatomy of a white-tailed deer.
Yep.
You know exactly where that bullet needs to be placed on that for absolute success. And when it's done right, especially with kids, when it's done
Yep.
right and it didn't, you go over there and it's laying there or 20 yards away, it's amazing feeling. It's a high that
It
hunters have
is.
been chasing since the beginning of time.
Yep. It's amazing. Well, all right, Chris, man, I appreciate you jumping on with us.
No, man, if you want to talk about fall turkey hunting or triggers or deer hunting, you give me a call anytime. And one of these days, you're invited up to an old place in Appalachia, and we'll take a walk about daylight and see if we can't find a drove of turkeys. And
I'd love
I'll
it.
do a bunch of calling. You'll think I'm crazy because I'm calling way too much and way too loud. And hopefully a young gobbler walks out there and starts calling back, and I'll give you a shotgun with a 870 trigger fix in it, and we'll see if we can't bring home
I like
Thanksgiving dinner, because that's what we used to do.
Yep. That's what we used to do. Some of us still do.
Some of us
All right,
still
Chris.
do.
I appreciate it. Timney Triggers making trigger snobs of all of us all the time. All right, Gun Talk Hunters, you know the drill. Man, keep those muzzles pointed in a safe direction and always be on the hunt.